Hello, my name is Hope on the platform of eSeniors.org. eSeniors is a non-profit organization that provides virtual companion for seniors from age 60 and above. Virtual companion is basically designed to provide emotional support for seniors who feel lonely and isolated from their communities. And this is done remotely through the usage of video chat technology. So today, I want to especially welcome you all to today's reading section. We have been reading a book from Buchi Emitita titled Second Class Citizen. We've done several chapters, so we're going to be starting off from where we stop. Listen as I read. When Ada came in, Vicky lifted a hand and called his mother. He still knows me, Ada thought, as she calmed him from trudging. She held him tightly, as if by doing so she could breathe health into the sick boy. What is the matter with him? She asked first the doctor and then Chundi. Getting no answer, she turned to Miss, staring, who just stood there wringing her hands. If they knew what the matter was, they were not going to say. The ambulance is waiting. You will find out in good time. Meanwhile, we have to get him to hospital as quickly as possible, the doctor's order. Though there was an urgent thing in the doctor's voice by Ada's calculations, Vicky was not very ill. He was hot, running to 101 in body temperature, yet Ada did not feel that there was any need to panic. She was thinking that Vicky probably had a bout of malaria, which to her was just like a common cold. Malaria would make a child's temperature run high and it would go down as soon as the child was given Navaquine. In fact, if Vicky had had the attack at home, that was what she would have done. As far as she knew, judging from the experience she had with Titi, children suffered from malaria. Why all the panic then? She wondered. Any mother would cure a child of malaria without phoning the ambulance men or calling the doctor, who simply stood there ready as if for nothing but to sign a death certificate. Vicky said bye-bye to Chundi, she said as they made their way to the door. Vicky waved bye-bye weakly and also sang it in his particular way. They all, Chandi, Miss Sterling, and the doctor opened their mouths as if to tell her that the baby was too weak to talk. But they kept quiet when Vicky talked. Ada felt triumphant. Her son was simply running a high temperature, that was all. He was not dying, so they might as well get used to the idea. She felt like Jesus. What amazed his dumbfounded disciples when he said, Lazarus is not dead, he slept. He slept. The big daughter saw through her agony, her fear, and touched her shoulder quiet, gently, as she was about to step into the street. Your little son is very ill. I don't know what it is, but I am sure they will do their best for him at the Royal Free Hospital. Allah thanked him, but she was determined not to be made unhappy, not to be talked into expecting the worst. I think I know what the matter is, she boasted. I think it is malaria. Children do have it at home, you know. Just like having a common cold. This may not be malaria, you know, the doctor cautioned as he and the ambulance men helped her into the ambulance. In the ambulance, her thoughts were confused. Her brain worked tick-tock As they saw in Yoruba, whenever anyone was thinking fast, he would say that his brain worked like a talking clock. She wondered what could be wrong with a child who had said goodbye to her that morning. What could be so wrong as to merit an ambulance and a doctor? In Lagos, one had to either one had to be either a millionaire or a relative of the doctor's to warrant his visit. He wouldn't come just for a child running or high temperature. Now an ambulance was speeding her to Royal Free just for that. Why was the name of the hospital Royal Free? Was it a hospital for poor people, for second class people? Why did they put the word free in it? Free started to scroll her then. Where they're sending Vicky to a second class hospital, a free one, just because they were blacks. Oh God, what has she let herself in for? They might even use her child's organ to save the life of another child who would probably be white and rich and who would be admitted into a hospital that had no free in it. A paying hospital. Ada did not then believe in anything good coming from something you did not pay for. She viewed everything free with suspicion and reluctance. In Nigeria, you paid for your treatment. The fatter your pulse, the more intensive your treatment. She had never seen or heard of a place where a child was given such close attention by adults free. There must be a catch somewhere. By the time they arrived at the hospital, she was convinced Vicky inward were going to be taken away from him. The thought had got such a hold of her that she, at first, refused to let him go. Two nurses held her and took her into a small room with soft chair lining the wall. They made her a cup of tea with plenty of sugar in it. She drank it greedily with thanks, enjoying the taste of sugar, which she hated normally. She had hardly ever had sugar because African mother thought that sugar and meat caused worms. She had later come to like eating meat, but she never really acquired the taste for sugar. But on the day at the Royal Free, she was too hungry to care. She did enjoy the tea and was told to wait while Vicky was being examined. She waited and waited until she nearly fell asleep. Then she started to worry about Titi. She hoped Francis remembered to go for her. It was funny, really. She hadn't thought of looking for Francis. She did not want him to be worried. It wasn't anything serious. As for as far as Francis was concerned, she was still at work and Vicky was at Trendy's. Something kept telling her that she should tell her husband she should let her husband know. But how could she when she didn't know where he would be at the time of the day? He had stopped attending regular lectures and just read in his home. That meant would he could be in any library in London, or he could be with any one of his girlfriends. Ada was the last person to disturb him if he were busy on any of these preoccupations. She would tell him everything when she gets home. The nurse and two young doctors came to her. They told her that Vicky was very ill, but they'd taken all sorts of samples from him, and until they got the result, they could not treat him. They would keep him under observation in the hospital. To Ada, hospital usually meant two things: where you go for your baby to be born, or where you go when you are about to die. The first time she had been admitted to a hospital was when she was going to have TT. The only the only other person in her hospital in her family she knew had been a hospital was Pa. He had gone for a checkup and never came back. These thoughts chased each other through her mind as she tried to think of the right decision to make. She sensed somehow that she had little choice in the matter. Vicky had already been allocated a room, an isolated room, in case his illness was contagious. She was allowed to go in and see him. He had been struck it nicely in a blue coat with a blue fluffy blanket. He was not asleep, but stared at his mother as someone having a bad migraine might. It seemed as if he found it difficult to move his eyes. Could that be right after all? Was Vicky very ill? She clutched the railing of the coat. She was being watched through the glass partition. A nurse came to her and told her that it was time for her to go. Vicky needed rest and sleep. Ada nodded and said goodbye to him, but Vicky did not answer. His eyes seemed to be gazing at something which only he could see. Ada was not allowed to linger. She had to go. Why? She thought to herself, didn't the authorities permit the mothers of young babies to stay with their sick offspring in hospital? In Nigeria, where the weather was warm enough, she could have stayed outside the hospital under a big tree in the compound. Now she didn't know what she was going to do. Wait in a corridor. They would show her off. But until then, that was what she was going to do. Fancy admitting a year-old baby in a hospital and not giving him any treatment because they were all diagnosing the symptoms. Suppose the child was seized by convulsion, as her children used to be when they ran a hot temperature. The nurses would only pump injection into him. But she had seen babies suffer from these malaria seizures all through her life and knew all the first aid courses. The child might not, so the hospital might not, so she would stay. Ada dozed off on a wooden bench. When she opened her eyes, she was surprised to see the beautiful nurse with a soft voice who had told her previously that it was time to go. She looked at Ada for a long time and then smiled. Is Victor your only child? Ada shook her head. Vicky was not. There was another, but she was only a girl. Only a girl? What do you mean by only a girl? She is a person too, just like your son. Ada knew all that, but how was she to tell his beautiful creature that in her society she could only be sure of the love of her husband and the loyalty of her parents-in-law in having and keeping alive as many children as possible, and that though a girl may be counted as one child, to her people a boy was like four children put together. And if the family could give the boy a good university education, his mother would be given the status of a man in the tribe. How was she to explain all that her happiness depended on so much on her son staying alive? Do you know, I'm making another one. She volunteered to show the nurse how good a wife she was. The nurse, who either did not understand or whose idea of a good and valuable wife was different from Ada's, nodded but said nothing. If Ada did not go, they would send for her husband. She said she had to go. Ada had Ada said she would only go if they used force. And so long as they were not going to do that, she was going to stay. But she went down to the corridor below and watched some West Indian housewives coming to do their cleaning jobs. Later that night, Francis came. Titi was spending the night at Chondi's, so he had come to look for her. For a while, it seemed as if Vicky's illness might bring the parents together again. Francis did not tell her not to worry because he did not know how to do such thing, how to be a man. Instead, he cried like a woman with Ada. 3 days later, it was discovered that Vicky had virus, meaning late. So Ada read all about the horrible thing with its horrible, unpronounceable name in the library. She studied the causes and knew all the effects. But where did he get it from? We never heard of such thing in my family, and I never heard Ma mention it to me in your family either. Where did he get it from then? I want to know because I like to prevent it in future. If he has me any future, that is. They cure everything here, Francis replied, gazing into space. His chances of surviving are very slim. From the statistics, I checked it in a medical encyclopedia. I want to know where my son got this virus. The medical book say he must have taken it from his mouth. I am very careful with Vicky and have not made any mistake as I did with Titi. I want to know where he got it from. And look, Francis, I don't care what you think anymore. I am going to find out from Chondi. Come over you? What's come over you? He demanded, not believing his ears. What happened to you? What's happening to you? You want to know what's happening to me? I will tell you. You will have to know sooner or later. If anything happens to my son, I'm going to kill you and that prostitute you sleep with her. Do you not? You buy her pants with the money I work for, and you both spend the money I pay her when I go to the work. I don't care what you do, but I must have my children whole and perfect. The only thing I get from the slavish marriage is the children. And Francis, I am warning you, they must be perfect children. Francis looked at her as if with new eyes. Somebody had warned him that the greatest mistake an African could make was to bring an educated girl to London and let her mix with middle-class English women. They soon knew their right. What was happening to them? Francis wondered in their society, men were allowed to sleep around if they wanted. That gave the nursing mother a break to nurse her baby before the next pregnancy. But here in London, with birth control and all that, one could sleep with one's wife all the time. But he was not brought up like that. He was brought up to like variety. Women at home never protested, and Ada had said that she did not mind, but feeling the intensity of her anger, he sensed that she did mind. No man liked his freedom curtailed, particularly by a woman, his woman. He would not argue. He would not beat her into submission because of the baby, but he was not going to be tied to Ada either. Why, in bed, she was as cold as a dead body. Ada was still talking. She was going to Chondi. She was going to get the truth from her if it killed her. God help you, Francis said. This is not home. You know, you can be jailed for accusing her falsely. You will be in trouble if you go and fight a woman in her own home. You know, after all, she is keeping Titi for us. Yes, I know, she is keeping Titi so that you can pretend to go and see her at 11 o'clock every night. Last night you left at 11 and you did not come back until I was ready for work. Seeing Titi. An unforgettable pause followed, during which Ada seemed to be waiting up her freedom. After all, she earned the money in the family. She continued in a strange, threatening way. If she does not give me a good answer, I shall bring Titi home with me and I am not leaving his house to work for you until the kids are admitted into nursery or you agree to look after them. I don't care what your friends say. I am going to Trondheim. She had something to tell me. You are like your mother after all. That quarrelsome troublemaker. People say women grow up to be like their mother, but unfortunately for you, you are not as tall and menacing as she was. You're small, and I'm sure Chundi will teach you a lesson or two. Well, I see. Ada replies as she dashed out of the house in a rage. They said at the hospital that Vicky had virus meningitis and he is still on the danger list. I want to, Ada began, but Chundi cut her short. Yes, I phoned the hospital and they told me that, so I told them that you had brought him to London only a few months ago. He could have caught it from the water you drank at home. You know, before you brought him here. Ada stared at her. She could not believe her eyes. What was she dreaming? What was it Tony was saying about the child she had in the best hospital in Nigeria, in the best ward, under the most efficient Swedish gynecologist that the Americans could get from her as a member of their staff, which was one of the innumerable French benefits attached to working for the Americans. She wanted to explain all this to Chonde, but at the moment she saw Titi coming in from the backyard, as filthy as the last time. Ada never knew what came over her. All she knew was that she lost control of the situation. Her inner eye kept seeing kaleidoscopically Vicky and Titi in the rubbish dump in Choddy's backyard. She could not eradicate that picture rotating in her mind, and she did the only thing that came to her instinctively. In front of her was an enemy insulting her country, her family, her person, and worst of all, her child. Somebody had left a carpet sweeper by the door. Ada later wondered why this was so, because there was no carpet in either of Chondi's two rooms. Without thinking, she picked it up, heavy as it was, and banged it blindly in the direction of Chondi's head. Chondi saw it coming and dodged. Somebody, another neighbor of Chondi's who was standing in the doorway, held Ada from the back. Don't do that. This neighbor voice came from behind her, cold, rational, reassuring. Ada spat firmly in the mouth, just like the people of her tribe would have done. Among her people, she could have killed Chondi, and other mothers would have stood solidly behind her. Now she was not even given the joy of knocking senseless this fat loose flesh woman with dye hair and pussycat eye. She belonged to the nation of people who had introduced law and order. Wow, such an interesting story. So this is where we're going to be ending today's book reading section. Thank you so much for your active listening. Till we meet again in the next session. Thank you and bye bye.